This call is now being recorded.
Okay, class, 2 Alpha and 2 Beta, good morning. How do you do? Can you hear me? Jiali, okay, thank you. Liang Ying Tung, okay, thank you. Thank you for your response. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay, number one, can you hear me? Number two, can you see my presentation? Also can, make sure you can hear me. And then also make sure you can see my presentation, yeah? Right. Okay, thank you for your response. Thank you very much. Okay. So our lesson for today, I think we continue to learn the next chapter for Form 2. That is chapter 2. The chapter for chapter 2 is ecosystem. Okay. We are still learning the first themes in Science Form 2. That is the maintenance and the maintenance of what? What's the themes one? Maintenance and continuity of life. Meaning that if you still remember, there are 4 chapters in Form 2. Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4 is what we're going to learn is we learn about the living organism, yeah, including us as human, animal, and plant. And I hope Chapter 1, biodiversity, you already understand what we already learned in Chapter 1. And then if you have any question, or maybe later on, I will give you extra exercise lah, yeah, to test you whether you understand or not what we already learned in Chapter 1. But now it's Chapter 2. Chapter 2, we're going to learn about ecosystem. Okay. What we're going to learn? Okay, one by one. Where is the mouse here? Suddenly not working. Okay. You must able later on. You must be able to answer this type of question. Yeah. How does energy flow in the ecosystem? What is the energy flow? And then number 2, you're able to explain the interaction that exists between living things. Okay, what is the interaction later on? And then number 3, how is the knowledge on interaction between living things applied in agriculture? How we can harvest or take this type of interaction for our use. Okay, this is what we're going to learn in chapter 2. There are 4 subtopics in chapter 1. So we go to subchapter number 1. That is 2.1, or you can refer to your textbook page 22. Page 22. I believe you already have your textbook, physical textbook. So you can also refer to the page 22. Okay. This is our first topic for today. Okay. Okay, the first subtopic is the energy flow in an ecosystem. Okay, energy flow in the ecosystem. right? So you need to remember, okay, you need to remember in ecosystem, there are three what we call organism, okay? You need to remember these three organisms classified by what we call, one is producer, one is consumer, and one is decomposer, okay? This is what we call the classification of what we call the role. Yeah, actually it is the role of organism in an ecosystem. So what is ecosystem? Okay, ecosystem is just like the habitat, okay, and then the animal itself, and then what it's eat, and then what the interaction. This is what we call by our ecosystem. Later we go on to what is the ecosystem, right? So for this, for the first topic, you must understand what is producer, what is the consumer, and what is decomposer here. Okay, we go through one by one. First is the producer. So I will highlight the keywords only, right? Okay. Producer, consumer, and decomposer is what we call the role in ecosystem. This is all about living things. Yeah? This is all living things. Okay. So first role is producer. You must remember it is an organism, living organism that produce its own food through photosynthesis. Okay, producer. They produce. Okay, they can produce their own food. They can make their own food through photosynthesis. And then most of the plants are producer. Okay, if you see here in the diagram here, if you see any plant, okay, any kind of plant that are able, actually, they are able to make their own food. And then most of the plant that able to make their own food, we call it through photosynthesis, right? So we call this plant producer. Okay, remember this. We call this organism producer. Okay, so next one, the second role, the number one, you must understand the first role is producer. The second role of organism in ecosystem, we call it primary consumer. Okay, primary consumer. Okay, what is meaning by consumer? From the word what? Consumer from the word consume. Mean what? Anybody? Consume mean what? Consumer. From the word consume mean in the end we call it they use it. They use, mereka menggunakan, ataupun mereka in the ecosystem we call it they eat. Okay, mereka menggunakan, mereka makan, ya, we call it consumer. Okay, and then what is the primary? Primary one. Primary is what? Primary, we call it primary because they are the first consumer. The first consumer. Usually, what they consume? Okay, we look one by one. Primary consumer, organism. Again, yeah, we are learning about organism that eat another organism. Okay, that eats another organism. Mostly they will eat plant. Okay, primary consumer are herbivore and omnivore that eat producer. Okay, they eat plant. The primary consumer is the animal or the organism that eat producer. Okay, can you understand this? This is what we call by primary consumer. Okay, this is primary consumer. Usually it will eat producer. That's why we call it primary. Because maybe the prime food yang utama, makanan yang utama. Makanan yang utama, the primary sources of food for this organism are usually from plant. For example, what is the animal that eat plant? Anybody? Animal that eat plant. You can see inside the textbook, inside here there are caterpillar. Yes, Liao Ying Tung, sheep, cow. Yes, Wamantai cow, Jinshuan. Any animal that what we call a eat plant, we call it, yes, goat. We call it primary consumer. This is what we call by herbivores. Herbivores. Herbivores mean eat what? They eat plant. Okay. Omnivore. What is omnivore? Who can say what is omnivore? I think you already learned in primary school. And plant.
This call is now being recorded.
What happened? Okay, never mind. Okay, omnivore mean maybe it can eat both animal, others animal, and also it also can eat plant. Yeah. Okay, next one. Next one is what we call by secondary consumer. Okay, I will go to another page. Page 23. Yeah. This is secondary consumer. Still consumer. Consumer mean what? It eats or it consumes another organism, whether it is plant or animal. But it is secondary. So what is the secondary? The primary mean the main one. Secondary, number 2. Secondary is the consumer, number 2. Usually, it is omnivore and carnivore. What is omnivore? Omnivore is it will eat plant and other organism. And then carnivore is what? Carnivore means it's only eat meat. Animals that eat plant and others animal. This is omnivore. Okay. And then what is carnivore? Carnivore is what we call animal that eats others animal only. Okay, this is carnivore. Example of carnivore is what? The example of carnivore is lion, what? Tiger. Okay, because they only eat others animal. The primary food for carnivore animal is mostly meat. Okay, so that is the carnivore. Good. So secondary consumer is omnivore and carnivore. And then make sure you can give me example, example of the example of animal that is category under the secondary consumer. Okay. For example, here Himalayan blue tails, or we call it the birds here. The birds here we call it Himalayan blue tails. It is omnivore because it eats caterpillar and fruit. Caterpillar is the type of animal, and then fruit is the producer, right? Fruit from the plant. So we call it omnivore. Okay. Kingfisher, the second example of animal, we call it kingfisher. We call it carnivore because it eats primary consumer such as snail, fish, tadpoles. We call it because we call it what we call secondary consumer because it eats primary consumer. Okay, it is not eat another plant or whatever. All right. So number 1, 2, 3, and number 4. The next consumer here we call it tertiary consumer. Tertiary mean consumer number what? Number 3. Okay, number 3. It is what we call by tertiary consumer. Very easy to remember. It is what we call a secondary carnivore. Secondary carnivore, that's it, a secondary consumer. You just remember like this. Tertiary consumer eat secondary consumer. Secondary consumer eat primary consumer. And then primary consumer usually eat producer. Can you see the flow here? Can you see the flow here? Okay. The size of tertiary consumer is usually bigger than primary or secondary consumer. Usually tertiary consumer is a lot bigger. The size of the body is bigger. Usually what, for example here, human, and then the fox has, and then the lion and the tiger is usually categorized under tertiary consumer. Yeah. Any problem? Any question? Okay, no problem. Very good. Okay, if you can see here, I just sorry a bit. Every producer, okay, producer and consumer. You still remember producer? Producer is, for example, it will produce its own food, and then mainly producer we call it plant. Plant is mainly the producer, and then all the consumer. How many consumer in here? How many consumer? 3 consumer. Okay, very good. Ziying, Yingtong. There are 3 consumer and 1 producer. This is all organism. Yeah, this is all organism. And then eventually, sooner or later, producer and all the 3 consumer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer, all these 3 organisms will eventually be what? Dead. Semua ini akan mati nanti. Alright. Primary producer, secondary consumer, number this is not producer, number 1. Number 2 is the primary consumer. Number 3 is the secondary consumer. And then number 4 is tertiary consumer. All of the consumer will later be dead. Okay, semua ini akan mati ya. And then what happened? What happened to their dead body? Okay, what happened to the dead body? It will be decomposed. Okay, any organic matter, any living organism, when the organism is already dead, it will be decomposed. Okay, so number 4, the next one you need to learn is decomposer. Okay, what is decomposer? It's an organism that breaks down dead animal and plant into simple material. You just remember this. Okay, it's an organism that breaks down animal. Okay, it will decompose the dead animal and dead plant. Okay, mainly maybe some bacteria. Some bacteria and then some microorganism, okay, will eat the dead animal, dead meat, and then dead animal and plant, and then it will decompose them, okay. And then the interaction we call it saprophytism, saprophytism, okay. And then it will break down into what? You just remember, it will break down the meat, it will break down the entire body of the animal and plant into simpler material or nutrient to be absorbed back to where? After an animal die, it will be decomposed, and then after decomposed, it will be absorbed back by the soil. Okay, maybe as a nutrient to the plant again. Okay, so this interaction we call it saprophytism. Okay, saprophytism. Okay, any question here? Do you understand the role of organism in ecosystem? This is what we call the role of organism. Yeah, you must remember. Okay, what you need to remember: producer, and then consumer, and then what we call the example of producer, and then the example of the producer, and then what happened, for example, between producer, primary consumer, and secondary consumer. What happened? which organism eat what organism. Dia makan yang mana. Okay. You cannot say producer eat primary consumer. Cannot. Ada ke pokok makan orang? There is not. Belum ada lagi ya. Ada ke pokok makan orang ke pokok makan binatang? Maybe there is, but mostly, a producer will be eaten by the consumer. Okay, make sure you understand this, because this is also very popular question. Okay, next one. Food chain. This one is very simple. What we call topic here. Okay, I just directly give you the example. Okay, food chain. You must. This is an example of the food chain. That's why you must first identify which organism that fit into the role of producer, whether it is producer, whether it is consumer. And then consumer, you must remember, are divided by 3: primary consumer, secondary consumer, and tertiary consumer. For example here, cabbage. Cabbage, you know that is the type of plant. So cabbage is the producer. Okay. And then snail. Also, you must be able to identify or able to understand snail usually eat what. Okay. When the snail, for example, we know that snail will eat the leaf, right? Will eat the plant. So snail, we put snail under primary consumer. Okay. How about birds? Birds also eat snail. Bird eat the snail, so we put under secondary consumer. And then how about fox? Fox will eat the bird, so we put it under tertiary consumer. This is example of we call by a food chain. Later in the workbook, you try to answer the question. You understand the food chain? Very easy. You need to understand the animal, and then you need to put the animal inside the what we call the role, whether it is producer or consumer, and then identify the animal eat what animal, or maybe the animal eat plant or the animal eat another animal. Okay, boleh ini very easy. Okay, number 2 is footwear. Footwear is a few food chains combined together. We call it footwear. That's all. Okay, you got many food chains. We combine the food chains and then we call it footwear. Okay, for example here, cabbage. Cabbage is the plant, or we call it what? Cabbage. Cabbage is producer, right? Cabbage is the producer. Okay, and then producer will be eaten by caterpillar, snail, and grasshopper. Caterpillar, snail, and grasshopper is what we call consumer. Which consumer, Yingtung? Caterpillar, snail, grasshopper. Which type? What type of consumer? Liao Yingtung. Yes, correct. It is a primary consumer. Caterpillar. Why you call it primary consumer? Because it only eat what? We call it primary consumer because it will only eat Lin Jinshuan, Ziying. Yes, very good. Because it will only eat plant. Wei Ro. Yes, it will only eat producer, which is plant. We call it primary consumer. Okay, and then we see the second one. This is the producer. Okay, this is producer. Okay, and then this is primary consumer. Okay, and then the third one, the second one is what we call the secondary consumer. For example here, birds and frog. Because birds will eat caterpillar, frog will eat grasshopper. And then the last one is the tertiary consumer. tertiary consumer, maybe that the organism that eats others organism. Okay, and then you must understand how to draw the food web here. You look, you try to identify the arrow here. You try to identify the arrow here. Right? This is the arrow, meaning that cabbage is eaten by caterpillar. You cannot draw the arrow at the opposite direction. Yeah. This one cannot. You cannot draw the opposite direction. Make sure you maybe the question asks you to draw the food web. Make sure you draw the arrow the correct way. This is not the correct way. Okay, cabbage, for example, eat by the grasshopper. Okay, you must draw the what we call the energy flow of the what we call between the consumer and producer correctly. Okay. Okay, class. Based on the picture here, I want to ask you something here. How many food chain in this food web? Maybe the question will ask you, how many food chain here? Food web means the whole organism here is what we call a food web. Food chain, how many food chain here? 4 food chain. Ziying, Jinshuan, 4 food chain. Ziying also 4 food chain. Okay, we try to do it together, yeah? Is it 4 food chain? Okay. Where is the first one? Anybody? The first food chain here, what is the first food chain? I just try to draw a line here. I try to draw the line. Okay, the first food chain is cabbage, and then caterpillar, and then birds. Sorry, cabbage, caterpillar, birds, and snake. Okay, cabbage, number 1, caterpillar, number 2, cabbage, number 3, and snake, number 4. So this is the first food chain in the food web. Okay, can you understand this? Boleh faham ya? Okay, now the second one. Where is the second food chain? Can I change the color of the? Cannot change the color. Cabbage, snail, bird, snake. That is number 1, right? Okay. The second one, the second one is cabbage, snail, birds, and snake. That is the second one. Number 3 is cabbage, grasshopper, birds, and snake. That is number 3. And then number 4, cabbage, grasshopper, frog, and snake. So there is you're correct. There is 4 food chain in the food web. Okay. Okay, very good. You can understand this very quickly. Make sure you're able to draw the food web, the food chain, and then able to identify how many food chain there are in food web. Okay. So next question. Energy flow in food web. So what's mean by energy flow? What is mean by energy flow? Okay, I read the article for you. As seen in the food chain, energy is also transferred from one organism to another organism in the food web. In reality, some of the energy is lost because it is used by the organism to move and carry out the life process of respiration. Okay, can you understand this? What is the meaning by energy flow? What is the what we call how do we get energy? Anybody? How we get the energy? How the animal get the energy? How the animal get the energy? From? Yes, animal eat. Animal will eat. So it will get the energy, especially for consumer. especially for the consumer. Primary consumer, secondary and tertiary consumer, they get energy from eat. Eat what? Eat another organism. For example, caterpillar here, snail and grasshopper get the energy from eating the cabbage. The caterpillar, snail and grasshopper get the energy eating the cabbage. And then what is what we call an energy flow? This is what we call an energy flow. Energy from the cabbage, and then we'll get into the caterpillar, and then the energy inside the caterpillar will transfer to the birds, because birds eat the caterpillar. Birds eat caterpillar in order to get the energy. And then inside the birds also have energy, so it will be eaten by the snake, because snake also need energy. Energy from where? Energy from the birds. Yeah. Okay. But the question here, whether the energy quantity same or different throughout all the what we call the food chain here, the food web here. The energy quantity or the amount of energy same or different? Anybody? The amount of energy same or different? You can see here there is an okay, Ziying different, Chua Wei Xiang, yes, very good. The amount of energy transfer is different, yes. Okay. If you say different, the energy is lost or gain. For example, the birds here, for example here, the birds here eat the caterpillar. So the amount of energy transfer from the caterpillar to the birds, the amount of energy, they gain the energy or the energy is lost. Which one? Vijali, yes. The amount of energy when transfer between the two organisms will lost. Okay, you can understand here. The arrow without the dotted line, we call it an energy flow. And then the arrow with dotted line, we call it energy loss. Okay, the amount of energy is not the same. Okay, there will be an energy loss. Because why? For example, birds will eat the caterpillar. Birds will try to use the energy. Energy for what? Energy for respiration. Energy for what? And then energy for... And then it use energy to hunt down the animal. For example, the snake. When the snake want to eat the birds, it will use the energy, okay, in order to hunt for the birds. To capture the birds, they use energy. So some of the energy will lost. Okay, the energy that come from the cabbage and then go to the primary consumer and then go to the secondary and then go to the tertiary consumer, the energy is not the same. There will be a loss of energy. Okay, energy will be lost. Lost by what? Respiration, life process. Move and carry what? Carry out the life process. I already said about this. Okay, and then also loss in the form of energy, heat or chemical energy through undigested food. Okay, and that's why there is a loss of energy in the energy flow. Okay. Now it's 11:05. Do you understand the first topic, 2.1? Any question? Any question? No question, yeah? Okay, very good. So do you want to continue 2.2 or what? 2.2. I think we continue 2.2, yeah? We continue 2.2 because 2.2 is a short subtopic, no problem. Later on, you do the formative practice 2.1 here ya, on your exercise book. Like usual lah. Macam biasa, kamu buat latihan ini nanti. So, if there is no question, I will continue to subtopic 2.2. We call it a nutrient cycle in an ecosystem. The nutrient cycle. Cycle mean what? Cycle mean just like a bicycle, you know the cycle. Okay, it will got a repetition, just repeat itself, cycle. Okay, sometimes it has another role, and then most of the time will have another role in a cycle here. Very easy one. Okay. Okay. Just like role in organism. Okay. Producer is plant, right? Where they get the energy. Okay. Again, if you still remember, if you understand the first subtopic, where the plant get the energy? Producer. Producer here. For example, cabbage and paddy plant, bijali. Okay, they get the energy from the sunlight. Okay, very good. Liao Ying Tong, they will get it from the water. Very good. And then, just two. And then maybe nutrient from the soil. Okay, and then like I said earlier, when all the producer and all the consumer die, and then it will be decomposed. It will be decomposed by the bacteria, and then all the nutrient inside the dead organism will be absorbed back to the soil. And then from the soil, the nutrient from the decomposed body, the nutrient from the decomposed body of animal and plant will be absorbed back to the plant. This is what we call a nutrient cycle. Okay, right. Okay, again, the transfer of nutrient and energy. The transfer of nutrient and energy is the continuous. It will repeat itself. Okay, and then nutrients are obtained from balanced ecosystem and used by living things. Then the nutrients are returned to the environment to be used again. This is what we call a nutrient cycle. Okay, so we go to the first cycle. We call it a water cycle. I think we already learned this in Form 1. We learn about Earth, right? We also learn about some of the water cycle here. All right? Can you understand this? All right. Okay. Okay, water cycle here. So again, water is absorbed by the roots and plant in the ground. Because I need to record this.
This call is now being recorded.
Okay, I don't know why you are stopping the recording here. How to stop you from stop the recording? Okay, water is absorbed by roots and plant in the ground and then released into the atmosphere through transpiration. And then animals carry out respiration, defecation, and excretion. And then all of this increase the water content in the atmosphere. Okay. And then roots and plant hold the soil tightly and make structure of the soil more compact. This slow down the flow of water underground and prevent soil erosion. Okay, you must understand this cycle here. All right. Water sits underground and then evaporation, transpiration. Transpiration is what? You just remember. Transpiration, water coming out from the plant. Evaporation, if you still remember the state of matter, okay, from liquid to gas, we call it evaporation. Okay. And then respiration, defecation, and excretion is the process of living organism. And then this also increase the amount of water in atmosphere. Okay, the air around us also consists of water vapor. Okay, and then all of this water will go to form a cloud, and then when the cloud is heavy enough, it will form the rain. And then when it forms the rain, it will flow into the river, it will flow into the ocean, and then into the lake, okay, and then it will start to evaporate again. This is what we call the water cycle here. Water cannot be destroyed, but it can be changed into different state of matter. Still remember, a different state of matter. Okay, from liquid it will turn into gas, and then from gas it will turn into liquid, and then in some area, the colder area, maybe the water will form into solid, right? In the form of snow, glacier. Snow glacier is the water that is formed in the form of solid matter. Okay, make sure you understand this first, and then if you have any question, you can ask me later. This is what we call by the water cycle, because water is one of the non-living matter that is very important in life. Okay, the water, right? Okay, next one. Next one is what we call by carbon and oxygen cycle. Okay, you must understand the process. Number one, respiration, use oxygen. Respiration is the process use oxygen in both plant and animal, also human. We need oxygen in order to live, right? Animal also need oxygen, plant also needs oxygen. This is what we call respiration. Okay, use oxygen in blue arrow, the blue color arrow, use oxygen. Okay, what is other process that use oxygen? We'll try to. Okay, what is the other process use oxygen? Number one is respiration, and then number two is decomposition. This one, sorry. Decomposition also use oxygen. The blue arrow here, use oxygen. This one use oxygen, use oxygen. Respiration, decomposition, and then respiration also in plant, respiration in plant and respiration in animal. These are the process of use oxygen. Okay, and then plant die, and then what is it? This called decomposition. Okay, what after we use oxygen, we will release carbon dioxide, right? So what are the process that use carbon dioxide? We call it photosynthesis. The red arrow one here, photosynthesis use carbon dioxide. Okay, and then when we use oxygen, what is the byproduct of the respiration, photosynthesis, and decomposition? It will release carbon dioxide. So this is what we call by the oxygen and nutrient cycle. In this chart, in this what we call flow, you must able to identify which process use oxygen and then which process release the oxygen. There are two parts: release oxygen and use oxygen. And then only one process that release oxygen. Anybody can tell me what is the process that release oxygen? Only one process. What is the process? Based on the book here, but based on the what we call the flow, biar jali, very good. Photosynthesis. Only photosynthesis release the oxygen. Okay. Respiration use oxygen. Respiration use oxygen. Decomposition also use oxygen. Okay. There only one process that use carbon dioxide. Only one process use carbon dioxide. Also what? Very same answer. Use carbon dioxide and then release the oxygen. Also, yes, Lim Jishuan. Yes, photosynthesis. Yes. Okay. One process that is release oxygen, we call it photosynthesis. And then the process that also use the oxygen, also we call it photosynthesis, only in plant. Yeah? Yes. Okay. In this chart, you must be able to identify the process, whether the process use oxygen or use carbon dioxide, or maybe release oxygen or release carbon dioxide. Okay, very easy to remember, right? So give me one. If you still remember, I want to ask you something. Give me, if you still remember in Form 1, what are the process, not in the picture, yeah? Not in the picture. The process is not in the picture, but it use oxygen. What is the process? Not in the picture here. Not in the picture here. But it use oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Wu Wei Ro, very good. Combustion. Yes, it is combustion. When you burn things, for example, you use flame, you use fire to burn things, it will use oxygen and then it will release carbon dioxide. Okay, combustion is one of the process. Rusting also, yes, rusting will use the carbon dioxide, the oxygen, yeah? Okay, very good. Okay, the role of living things in carbon cycle and oxygen cycle, I think you can read it for yourself. Okay, I just explained to you just now, yeah? This one you need to, maybe you do the further reading lah, in order to understand what I'm talking just now. Okay, and then again, can you imagine what happened if one of the process is interrupted? For example, what happened when suddenly all the photosynthesis cannot, when all the green plant all destroyed, and then there is no photosynthesis? What's going to happen, you think? All the organisms die. We will die. Yes, yes, because the sources of oxygen, yeah, the main sources of oxygen in atmosphere right now is from the plant. When the plant undergo photosynthesis, right? Many other organisms use what? Use, for example, human and animal. Human and animal use oxygen in order to breathe, right? So when there is no oxygen, the problem is oxygen only produced by photosynthesis, by the green plant. By the green plant, yeah? If there is no oxygen, so maybe we will, maybe sooner or later we will die because there is no oxygen, right? Okay, make sure you understand that. Okay, next one. Step to solve problem when there is an interference. That's why I call by interference. Okay, what are the interference? Unrestricted logging, potong pokok. You cut down the tree. This is the interference, gangguan. The next one, burning of fossil fuel. When you burn something, it will produce carbon dioxide, and then it will distort or it will disrupt the cycle. And overconsumption of water resources. Overconsumption of water resources. This is also what we call the interference. Okay, I want to ask you something. This interference is caused by who? Animal, plant. Unrestricted logging, burning, yes. Liao Yingtong, very good. It is because of us, human. I don't know human, yeah? Humans sometimes very destructive, yeah? They, you know, they tend to destroy something, okay? All the interference is mostly from us, human, okay? We like to cut down the tree because we want to take the wood to build furniture, right? To build the building. We want to, you know, we use the what we call the sources without what we call without planning, okay? But most have negative impact. But most of the interference caused by human have negative impact with the nutrient cycle, okay? For example, the human activity unrestricted logging, burning of fossil fuel, and overconsumption of water resources. Okay, so what is the step to what are the steps to solve the interference in the nutrient cycle? Okay, these are the only several steps you need to remember. Yeah? So number one is we created plant agriculture, use public transport. Number three, store rainwater for daily use, replant tree, and tighten the laws. These are the way, some of the way, you know, to what we call to solve the interference to the nutrient cycle. Because remember, if we interfere or if we disturb the nutrient cycle here, the ecosystem will be at what we call will be destroyed. And then also maybe human also will be destroyed and die later. Okay, right. So the first one here is what we call the activity of human that interfere with the nutrient cycle. The second one here, the way to solve. This one is the way to solve the interference of human. Is number 2. Okay. Any question? Is there any question? Okay, now it's 11:23. We stop right on time. So for your work, okay, very good, Wei Xiang. Thank you very much. This is your homework. Okay, you open your textbook and then as usual, after we finish each subtopic, you need to do formative practice, right? So how many formative practice today? 2.1 and 2.2. Okay, yes, Liao Yingtong, you have two formative practice, 1.1 and 1.2. Okay, and then for your workbook, okay, for your workbook here, you can try to finish page 12, page 13, and page 14. A very short answer. I think you can do it if you understand all the you know, you try to find the answer on the textbook, and then I already cover all this. So in your workbook, you finish page 12, page 13, and then 14. Okay, so I will repeat again the homework in our Telegram groups. Yeah, okay, okay, very good. All right, if there are any question, okay, no question. So I think we can stop here. Liao Yingtong, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for your focus and cooperation. So we meet again when? When is our next class? Friday, right? Not this Friday, because this Friday is Kongsi, right? Kongsi Pacai. So we're on holiday. So I think we'll be meeting you again in next week lah. Next week, next week, So happy Chinese New Year. Happy holiday, and then we see you later. Okay, next week, and then you do my homework, and then thank you very much. Happy holiday, happy Chinese New Year. Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.